John. 3 John. And I am all out of sorts. Let me get the PowerPoint real quick. That's not it. So while I'm doing this, obviously we're drawing near to an end in the letters of John, and so what we will be looking at, kind of the road I have in mind anyway, if it doesn't conflict with any of the other classes that are going on, is from here to move to Job. And it's 42 chapters, but don't be scared off by that. It's not 42 chapters. We're dealing with poetry, so in class sessions we can take 2 and 3 chapters at a time, because in poetry many times they're saying the same thing in about 6 different ways, and so we're able to cover a good deal of ground in that book. But I want us to spend some time thinking through what's going on there, and then after we do that, hopefully turn our attention to Romans, which is a terror to me. I have avoided it for many reasons for the last 20 years, not teaching it. So, but we will go from there to there, and then if I have a brain cell left, we might go to Revelation after that. But I've been taking Revelation right now. I only have a 15-page paper to do with nothing. I have absolutely nothing. It's only due next Wednesday. So anyway, I'm a little Revelationed out, just a little tired. So that's kind of at least what I have in mind is Job, and then Romans, and then Revelation. So, all right, 3 John. 3 John. We talked about how 2nd and 3 John both will have some things concerning Christian hospitality. We spent a good deal of time last week talking about what is entailed in their understanding of hospitality, how their cultures worked, how their communities worked, and how hospitality meant something very, well, it's much more intense than we view hospitality. It doesn't mean our version of hospitality is wrong. It just means it's a little more intense. Their suspicion of other people, and so basically when someone extended hospitality, they were vouching for you in the community. So as we think about this book, just briefly going over the same questions, it's most likely written by the Apostle John, who wrote 1 John, 2 John, Revelation, and the Gospel of John. And there are several markers within the text, and also statements outside of the text as well by others. The place, it's most likely written from Ephesus along with all these others. When we think about when it is written, most likely again in the 90s. But when we think about the purpose of this book, it's a little bit... So for a long time when I studied 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, I thought 3rd John was directly connected to the same subject matter, exact same subject matter as 2nd and 1st John, which is the Gnostics. And that may be true, but I don't know that case is as strong as I once thought it was. I'll put it that way. I'll explain to you what I mean by that when we get there. But at the very least, what we've got is the letter being sent to one man who's Gaius, and then as he encourages Gaius, he talks to him about Diotrephes, and apparently it would appear they're part of the same congregation, house church. And then there's a discussion of Demetrius, who most likely is carrying the letter. And so it's really, you could think about it in those terms on those 3 individuals, but really it's a letter of encouragement to Gaius over some things that are happening. Some, excuse me, some news that has reached John and some things that he wants to address with him. So, as we think about the book itself, let's just read it, and then we will try and work our way through it. The elder to the beloved Gaius, whom I love in truth, beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. For I rejoiced greatly when the brothers came and testified to your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Beloved, it's a faithful thing you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testified to your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God, for they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. I have written something to the church, but Diotrephes, who likes to put himself first, does not acknowledge our authority. So if I come, I will bring up what he is doing, talking wicked nonsense against us, and content with that. He refuses, and not content with that, he refuses to welcome the brothers and also stops those who want to and puts them out of the church. Beloved, do not imitate evil, but imitate good. Whoever does good is from God. Whoever does evil has not seen God. Demetrius has received a good testimony from everyone and from the truth itself. We also add our testimony, and you know that our testimony is true. I had much to write to you, but I would rather not write with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace be to you. The friends greet you. Greet the friends, each by name. All right. So we move in, and it's the same. John describes himself as the elder, the same way he did in 2 John. This is just probably a reference to his age, not inherently talking about serving in the office of an elder, although it could mean that. It most likely doesn't. And so he's writing to Gaius. Now, in Scripture, there are a number of people that we're told about. For example, Gaius is a Gaius, not necessarily this one, but a Gaius is referenced in Acts 19:29, Acts 20 and verse 4, 1 Corinthians 1:14, Romans 16:23. It's a somewhat common name, okay? So any attempt to try and connect them is going to be a little difficult, right? So most likely there's not a connection between this Gaius and the other ones that we read about in the New Testament. And so the name itself simply means rejoicing. And so he's writing to Gaius, and he says, whom I love in the truth. That is, he continues faithfully in the truth, and what we've talked about is the bond that exists of people who seek to adhere to truth. Okay? There is a bond, even though we may not necessarily know each other, we share similar commitments and principles, and there's a closeness that exists. So he says, beloved, and this is a typical greeting, beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, so that you may be in good health as it goes well with your soul. This is a somewhat common greeting, and so he's just saying a kind of a Christian form of it. I hope that you're in good health. We often will say that and talk about that with people we don't see a lot, and especially as their health concerns grow. But basically saying, I want your health to go as your soul goes. As your soul is prospering, I want your physical health to match your spiritual health. And that's just I think that's an important thought to dwell on. One that we need to think about is if my physical health was a reflection of my spiritual health, in what condition would I be? Now, that's not a question I can answer for anybody other than myself, really. But I think it's an important principle that we need to think upon. Because if the outside manifested what was on the inside accurately, you name it. The same way you can look at different statuses of health in the physical body, you could see it. Some people would be just as strong and as vigorous as they were in their youth, and just a picture of health. Others would be sick. Others would be in the hospital. Others would be in the ICU. Others would be on life support. Others, as we talked about Sunday morning with the parable of the prodigal son, others would be dead while they live. And so it is an important thing to remember because, there are things that happen that force us to think about our physical health, right? Maybe we have a health scare ourselves, or we have to go into, I don't know, a number of different reasons. Maybe we get tired of feeling bad or something along those lines. We do that. Okay, so we can sometimes have indicators physically that tell us, hey, you need to pay attention to me. You need to pay attention to your body. Spiritually, sometimes, though, it's very easy to just kind of ignore because your soul's not going to grab you and just give you a cramp or start really hurting you in one spot to where you say, okay, I've got to give it attention. And so it becomes very easy for us to ignore it because we cannot see it. So that's the challenge for us, is to make sure that we look after the health of our soul. And that the Christian principle, the Christian dynamic is, as Paul puts it in 2 Corinthians 4, is that even though every day our outward body, even if you're a picture of health, your outward body is slowly decaying. It's slowly getting worse, okay? And that's for anybody. Our bodies are physically, they just wear out. They cannot last forever. But we have a choice with our soul. And so we can allow our soul to deteriorate the same way our body does, or we can allow our soul to get stronger and stronger, so that this dynamic happens, if you were to chart it, that our body is trending downward and our soul is trending upward. Okay? So I think that's, we'll just leave it there. I think that's an important principle. I also want to mention that most of you know who Oral Roberts is. I mean, there's a university named after him now. He was a health and wealth prosperity type preacher. David Harrell, professor at Auburn, who's a member of the church, he wrote his biography. Anyway, the health and wealth idea of prosperity gospel, he got that from this text. When he read 3 John 2, he took it and said, okay, sorry, that was Brooke. He said then that he had misunderstood the gospel, and so that physical prosperity and health and wealth gospel and healings had to be a part of his ministry. Well, that's a gross misuse of what's going on here. That's not what John is praying for. That's not what John is thinking about. And so it's just a typical greeting. Now in verse 3 he says, I rejoice greatly when the brothers came and testified to your truth, as indeed you are walking in the truth. And so what it seems has happened is, and we'll see it elaborated on in just a little bit in verses 5 through 8, is that missionaries have gone out and Gaius has helped them according to the standards and customs we talked about last week. And then upon their return and their report to the church, they have said that Gaius has helped us. He's done all these wonderful things for us. And that kind of leads John to say, I'm writing this letter to tell you how happy I am to hear of what you're doing and how you're helping people. Okay? Offering a note of encouragement. And I think that's just, I think that's an important thing in general. Sometimes people say, well, Bible class sometimes is not, it's just a little overly technical. Give me something practical. Okay, well, here's something practical. Never underestimate the value of encouraging people. And there is look, like it or not, there is a difference between, and I'm not saying that it always has to be this way, certainly. We live in a digital age, but there is the value of putting pen to paper and jotting a quick note to somebody. There's value in doing that with your spouse. There's value in doing that with all different types of people. Notes of encouragement along the way that help people. And that's what John is doing. You know, it's so easy to get focused on all of the bad things that happen in the world, but if we force ourselves every day to be grateful and express gratitude to someone else, it tends to change our wiring. It tends to change the way that we think and the way that we look out on the world. And so, I mean, when we look at the world, we'll see what we want to see. Okay? If we think that everything is falling apart and the sky is falling, that's exactly what we'll see. You'll find plenty of evidence for it. You'll also find plenty of evidence for a lot of good things that are happening. It's just a choice. Doesn't mean you're pie in the sky and you're ignoring that there are bad things that are happening, but it does mean you're choosing to focus on things that are positive. So never underestimate what that can do for someone. So he says this in verse 4, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. Now, the word child here, or my children, it could be a reference to just the way he's using it in First John, right? Where he's my little children, so forth. It could just be a way of endearment. He's the elder, they're the child. And so it could also be, I mean, you have to bear in mind, Paul calls Titus and Timothy both his children or his sons. It could be that John converted guys. I mean, that's a possibility. But the point being, he's got no greater joy than to hear that they're walking in truth. And this is the third time. So you see it in 3 John, 2 John, and 1 John, that there's something about a joy that comes from seeing people come to Jesus and to continue with Jesus. There's a sense of joy that comes with that. It's always fun for me to go back and to interact with people in other places where I've preached and to see how they're doing and to see that they are growing and to see that they are progressing. And, you know, with some of them, you were there and you studied with them and you baptized them and you do all those things. And it's encouraging to see them continue with it because there are many people that you do that with, you try and help, that don't always continue with it. And so I think what John is noting is just telling him, I'm happy with you, I'm proud of you, I'm proud to see your progress. And as Neil Pollard says many times, you'll never meet a person with a vitamin E deficiency. And what he means by that is encouragement. You'll never meet a person who's been over-encouraged. And so looking to, let me back. So when I was just starting and younger, I'm not under the assumption that, how do I put this? I'll put it this way. I was stunned when someone was upset that I didn't speak to them on one occasion. And I thought, I know plenty of people who would pay me money to never speak to them again. Like, I'm not aware that my speaking or not speaking to someone could ever bother anybody. Okay? I don't think I'm that kind of a person. I don't think I'm an important person like that. I don't think my word carries the weight that people hang on my every word. I think people tolerate and it comes in one ear and out the other and hopefully something sticks. But one of the things I have had to learn is wherever you are, whether you're teaching in a classroom or you're on a ball field and you're a coach or whatever you're doing, when you consider your position, you need to consider that you need to encourage people and people need to know that you appreciate them. And, I mean, who amongst us doesn't? We all have people we look up to, and when they come by and they say, I'm proud of you, or, I think of a Dale Jenkins is a hero to many preachers and churches of Christ. And he and his brother Jeff, and when Dale looks at me and he says, "Brad, we love you, we're proud of you," that means a lot. And so that's what we're seeing John do. We're seeing the now what's so interesting about all this is John is a son, he was characterized as a son of thunder. Why? Son of thunder is not a gentle term. He didn't get the nickname because he was gentle with people. He got the nickname because he was less than gentle with people. Let's call down fire from a village and consume them because they don't want to listen to you. But you see how much he has changed? In all of these years, probably somewhere around 60 years at this point, he has the gentleness of a grandfather who is just helping and encouraging people along the way. And it's a phenomenal transformation. So then he goes on and expounds upon what it is that he's doing. So he says, "Beloved, it is a faithful thing that you do in all your efforts for these brothers, strangers as they are, who testified of your love before the church. You will do well to send them on their journey in a manner worthy of God, for they have gone out for the sake of the name, accepting nothing from the Gentiles. Therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers of the truth." So again, you're welcoming these visiting preachers in. They're strangers, and they have come back and told of your love, the way that you have treated them, to the church in a mission report. And you will do well to send them on their journey. This became a technical term in early Christian writing, in Scripture and in writings thereafter, to describe the process of, you remember we said that when you welcomed a person into your home, you basically covered everything for them, and then you also covered the expenses for their journey to their next location. Okay? And so what he's talking about here when he says to send them on their journey is to help them get from this place to the next, and then in a manner worthy of God. That is to treat them well. I'm somewhat troubled sometimes when, let's get in a missionary's world for a minute, okay? Why don't you just walk with me in a missionary's world for a minute? So a missionary has to raise support, most of the time from multiple places. By the way, multiple places who can at any moment, for any reason, take their living from them. It is one of the most unsteady forms of income. Then they have to go around many times to tons of places, and places want to know, well, why do you need so much money? Have you lived in America lately? One friend who was a missionary in Tanzania, he had to have insurance because, not if, but when they got malaria, they were going to have to be helicopter flighted to another country. And that you have to have that insurance in place. That's not just, and look, that's just getting you living. That's not counting other things and expenses that go for helping the community there, for helping the church there, and things along those lines. And then, by the way, if they're late one month with a missionary report, they get somebody call them and rake them over the coals because, they should be sending their letter every month. And by all means, they usually do. But you have to understand something. These guys are trying to carry the whole load by themselves. So Alfred Lazar, a missionary on the island of Curacao, every morning he gets up on Sunday morning, he will get up super early, and he has to run the van, which has 300,000 miles on it. And he will be in that bus for 3 hours transporting people from their homes to the building. And when he gets there, then he preaches and does all of his things. Then he transports them back home, eats lunch, transports them again for evening. Preaches, transports them back home. That's just Sunday. Okay? Then churches say, well, if he's taking our money, and I always kind of shake my head at this. He's taking our money. Well, we're giving him $100 a month, and I'm not downplaying the importance of $100 a month. But come on. If you're going to pull the money card, at least let it be a legitimate amount of money to pull the money card with. All right? But then we say, well, we expect you to come back and give us a report every 2 years. Oh, you mean a tour around America that will cost a good $40,000? Which, by the way, I will be away from the mission field for probably 5 to 6 months. And then, when they come and they give a report, and then they preach, and then so many churches have the audacity to, well, no, I know you preach, but we're not paying you. We already pay you. Y'all, it's just not right. It's not right. It's not right. And that's not just an opinion thing, and I'm not just being, partial to them because they kind of do what I do, because I don't consider what they do is 10 steps ahead of what I do. But if you're asking me if I'm going to be a little bit partial to them and defend them, yes, I'm going to. Because I believe they do one of the most important works in the world. And one of the things that this is showing us, this is not just my opinion, this is biblically speaking, this is how God expected them to treat and communicate and support and help each other. And so when he's looking at it, and he says, what? Send them on their way in a manner worthy of God. That is, if Jesus came down, and in these cultures they have a notion of the divine coming down and visiting their communities. Send them forward and treat them well the way you would God himself. I'm not saying worship them, not saying anything inappropriate, but treat them well. That should be our goal. We treat people well. Because then he says what? For this reason they have gone out, taking nothing from the Gentiles. Listen, there were plenty of other preachers at the time, these itinerant travelers, who would go around and they would preach and perform all different types of things, and they would preach for money. Take up their donations, the same way that happens today. Give money to our ministry. Look, there's a reason churches of Christ have a long-standing tradition of not doing fundraising type things. We believe it's our job to support the gospel. We want to be able, like the early church did, to go out to people and say, we're not asking you for a thing. We're here solely because we care about you. Not because of your money, but because of you. And we will foot the bill ourselves in making sure that we can help you. And that's what he's saying. Look, they've gone out and they've done this. They accept nothing from the Gentiles. And people say, well, does that really have any effect? Well, one of my teachers in preaching school was one of the first things that drew him to Churches of Christ was he was not a religious man. Every Sunday morning he would listen to the radio station. He would listen to all different types of people preaching. And there was only one church who would never ask for donations on their radio program. Only one. So when people get the notion, and by the way, you can go visit some people and they think, oh, well, you're going to want money, aren't you? I've had people say that. You're here to ask for money, aren't you? I'm like, for what? That's one of the things that sets Christianity apart, but it's also a reason why, therefore, we must be generous in the way that we help and the way that we support other people. And so he says in verse 8, therefore, we ought to support people like these, that we may be fellow workers for the truth. When we do that, and Philippians 4 talks a lot more about that, but when what we do with generosity, not everybody can do this particular thing. But when we give, God sees it. You remember what we talked about Sunday night, playing second fiddle, and the idea of everybody cooperating and working together? Okay? So on this occasion, who is the most important when it comes to sending out a missionary? Well, it's going to be hard to argue that anybody's the most important. You got to have a missionary who's willing to go. You got to have a place that's willing to help them. You've got to have people who are willing to support them. It is a group effort. And so when God sees that, when God sees churches supporting other missionaries, what that missionary accomplishes, to use banking terms, which is kind of the way he uses it in Philippians 4, when God sees the good that is done, the good that is done by that missionary is then credited to the people who helped him do it. That's the way God treats it. And so he sees it as us all cooperating and working together. And so it becomes an important thing. And so one of the things about 3 John is that it gives us a glimpse into this early community and how they operate. May not be the most scintillating material to some people, may not be, I don't really get a lot out of this. Well, some of that kind of depends on what you're looking for. And so, anyway, we'll pick up here, hopefully finish it. Well, not a doubt, we'll finish it off next week. And then the week after that, we'll turn our attention to Job.